So as usual, I'm not as, the most flattering in appearance, but a huge part of sort of my MO on the channel is to inspire moms everywhere, especially in the Western world, to where we tend to be very isolated, to go for it. If you want to make videos, make videos. So that's kind of where I'm at. And if you like what you see here on this channel, please subscribe. And if you like this video, please give me a like. This is the best way you can support the channel and support me. So thank you so much. So this video is my story. This is taking me a long time to do this video. I never even considered doing a video on this until recently. And I just felt like all the pieces, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically, everything, all the pieces have kind of fit together now, in my experience and me in processing my experience, and I'm ready to share it now. Yeah, so I'm also kind of eating a little bit here while I'm doing the video. So something that's very, very important to mention is that what's going to be really important in listening to my story and understanding my story and taking aspects of that story to apply to yourself, or not, but if you are going to apply it to your situation, I highly recommend your intuition, your in touchness with your situation, in your body, and your experience is going to be so incredibly important. All right, in understanding how all this can, or if it applies to you. And another thing is that I've been practicing and learning about applied kinesiology for about a couple of decades now, and I use it religiously to check in with pretty much anything in my body. I'm going to be putting a link below to a couple of videos that I have on applied kinesiology specifically concerning cryptic pregnancy. But I'll also link videos just online about applied kinesiology and how you can learn to use it to check in with everything, whether it be something in your body, understanding symptoms in your body, or something that you're about to take into your body, or whatever it is. Applied kinesiology is a phenomenal way to find out specifically what is good and not so good for your specific situation, whatever it is. So I'm not going to start at the very beginning of my cryptic pregnancy story when it comes to this, but I'll start where it is relevant, okay? Like many of you, I had negative sonograms or supposedly negative sonograms, or unclear. I should say they were negative, but they were just basically unclear. I had too low HCG hormone for them to consider it to be a viable pregnancy. I had all that, okay? But fast forward to around 7 months pregnant. I had quit the hospital at that point long ago, and I was just going to do this on my own. I had a baby at home. I had had two natural births at that point, with my other two children, and one of them was an unassisted birth, or a free birth, in which there was no medical professional or midwife present at the birth, only my husband. I decided to take on the pregnancy on my own, with the support of my husband and my family. At around 7 months pregnant, I was still very small, outwardly, but inwardly I felt, like many of you, I felt the baby way back, and my uterus felt quite large. It just was all very tucked inside. So I really felt that there was a good-sized baby in there, and I had done a muscle testing or applied kinesiology when I started to feel some mild contractions. I thought I was going to have a preemie. I muscle tested and checked in with my intuition and everything, made sure that this baby was going to be okay if it came out a little bit early. And the answer was yes, and I felt very confident about that. And there was a hospital just down the street. Okay, so I got myself all ready to have a preemie. And in my other experiences, when I started having those contractions, the baby would come 48 hours to a week later, with the encouragement of some herbs, one of them being herbs and oils and supplements, one of them being evening primrose oil, and then the other being blue cohosh tincture. And I'll put the links below as well, links to where you can get those supplements, those herbs. And but the baby didn't come. And I was like, okay, so but I kept having these mild contractions. They were mild, mind you, but they were very consistent and they were exhausting. I fortunately had, I was living with my family. I had a lot of support, and I would, for most of the day, I had to just rest. I think many of us have been there, you know, for those of us who have had children and been a stay-at-home mom. And I should mention very specifically that every time I took any kind of herbs, I would use applied kinesiology to make damn sure that it was safe and healthy for the baby for me to take those herbs. And I really tapped into my intuition. So anyway, so I began sensing that I need to take higher and higher doses when the baby didn't come at 9 months and then 10 months. I just felt like I needed to be taking higher and higher doses, and I was very confused. You know, at that point, I never had this happen before, but I use applied kinesiology and my intuition to make sure that the doses I was taking were safe. And basically, I just kept having these mild contractions, and sometimes they would come on harder, sometimes they would back off a bit. I could sleep through them. And I was taking the blue cohosh and tincture and the evening primrose oil, and I ended up having those contractions for 6 weeks. And in that time, if I think back on it now, okay, well, at the time, my belly came way out. Like, it's like the belly, the uterus, with all the contracting and massaging, it drew the uterus out and the baby out. And my belly became harder. It became rounder in front rather than everything feeling like it was in the back. And at the end of those 6 weeks, I did have this really clear experience where I looked down and the baby, my daughter, was kicking around, which I had felt a ton of the kicking around stuff. I just didn't feel it a whole lot from the outside. Although I did feel it from the outside, but not in this way, not in this sort of like, I felt it was my hand from the outside, but I couldn't see it as clearly. And after that, around the end of that 6 weeks, I started to begin to see those elbows and everything, those knees and elbows. And then after the 6 weeks, those contractions died off, and they didn't return until a couple of weeks before her birth, which was around, she was born between 52 and 53 weeks, around that time. So her gestation was about a year. And also during that time, I should mention, those 6 weeks, I was also drinking fresh ginger infusion. I'd grate the ginger and I put it in a quart jar, and I'd pour hot water over it, and I'd let it sit for 2 to 4 hours, sometimes longer, but 2 to 4 hours is good. Like any more than that, it's very strong. It can get very strong. And I put honey in it, and I basically drank it for exhaustion, you know, and helped me to function. And now in retrospect, I realized that it helps with chi, the energy flow in the meridians. It helps with the energy flow between you and the baby, creating a sense of energy, energizing, and refreshment, you know, in the blood flow, as I said, between you and the baby. And so those 3 herbs, okay, those 3 supplements / herbs, the blue cohosh tincture, the evening primrose oil, and the ginger infusion, I drank and took all those throughout the 6 weeks. And the result was that the baby didn't come yet, but my belly came out, and the baby came out of hiding. You know, the baby came out from being settled way into my pelvic area, and you know, behind my abdomen, and kind of tucked, sort of, you know, but tucked in, sort of tilted back. And I did learn from a midwife later that my whole anatomy is down there is very retroverted. So but the now looking back on it in retrospect, okay, I learned so much. At the time, I really freaked out. I was like, the baby didn't come. I was doubting all of my kinesiology, everything that I'd ever practiced, you know, at that point, and I felt really freaked out about everything. Had I harmed the baby? Even though I knew I hadn't, you know, because I trusted my instinct, I trusted my kinesiology, but this was really new for me, okay? This was a rite of passage, a rebirth, you know, of really going deeper, you know, into my womanly knowing and trust of my own instincts, and grounding into my womanhood in a holistic way, and my motherhood in a holistic way. Anyway, at the time, it was all very confusing. But what I do know is that at the time I noticed that my belly had really come out. The baby was still very active and healthy, and the baby came out of hiding. After that, I mean, I had my last sonogram I had at 5 months. They said I was 5 weeks pregnant. It was just no way. You know, there was just absolutely no way. I'd been pregnant before. I knew what it felt like to be pregnant. The feeling of the baby in my womb did not feel like a 5-week pregnancy at all. So I really didn't have a scan. I didn't have a sonogram, you know, from, was it 5 months pregnant to about 10 months pregnant, and then around 11 months pregnant. I had a midwife come and listen and feel the baby, and I told her my story, and she was very compassionate, and she's a very intuitive, spiritual woman. And so I don't know how much she understood about what I was saying, but she took it in and was very supportive. And she's one of my mentors. I consider her one of my mentors. She's taught me a lot. And in the art in the birth arts, and then she ordered a sonogram for me, and they found the baby, and they saw the baby, and anyway, she was born a month later or so. Extremely healthy, and not just extremely healthy. She was so developed. You know, she was not. It was not like she was. You know, had been in the womb too long or something. She was just really developed. She was so healthy. Her eyes were really focused. She was really kind of substantial. She she was 7 pounds, and just had this really glowing skin, really focused eyes. And one thing that she didn't have, she never went through the startle reflex. She came out like almost like beyond that stage or something. Very active, great nurser. And now she's, you know, beautiful, healthy, strong, and driving me nuts. So basically what I want to go now and explain about the herbs that I use. Now in retrospect, almost 4 years later, you know, around 4 years later, I guess, understanding exactly what happened and how ingenious my body and the universe and my baby were and are. You know, applied kinesiology, what it does is it helps you tap into the energetic realities in your body and your subconscious. It's a method of asking questions, specific questions, to help understand your symptoms or your needs, etc. And I was definitely needing the blue cohosh and the evening primrose oil and the ginger infusion. And I muscle tested all those all the way throughout. As I said, like, was really, really aware of how much I should take. I did not just take it, you know, randomly or without care. Or knowledge. I was very aware of what I was doing, and the result was that it basically the blue cohosh tonifies and strengthens the uterus. Okay, and it does cause contractions in that case, and there's a lot of caution, you know, out there about using it during pregnancy if you're not, you know, if you're not at term or around term, and because of the risk of miscarriage. What I learned and what I've seen now as a doula and then a midwife, you know, now for quite a few years, is that a baby basically, unless you have a history of a lot of miscarriage and if you're doing it too early, you know, if you're taking that herb way too early in the pregnancy, but basically, you know, if the baby is strong and healthy and developmentally past the stage of where basically their eyes are still closed, if they're past that stage where they still would have a low chance of surviving if they were to come out, and they go into that time when even though they're preemie, they would be able to survive, they're not going to come out unless they're ready. Okay? That's basically my overall experience. Okay? Obviously, again, use your intuition, and I use applied kinesiology for everything. I use it to find out the developmental level of the fetus in the womb and the safety of taking certain herbs. And what in my profound experience, okay, with my daughter, was that taking all those herbs in the right way, all right, in the way that I specifically, my baby and my body specifically needed, it served to tonify and strengthen the uterus. Okay, I got pregnant with her extremely early after I had my second baby. To this day, I don't know how I did it. Okay, I got pregnant 2 months after I gave birth to my second baby. And so my uterus needed that tonifying, okay, that needed that strengthening with the blue cohosh. And then the evening primrose oil serves to, it helps to, I mean, the blue cohosh does this too, I believe. But the evening primrose oil, I know more specifically that it does, it helps to ripen things and during, like at the end of pregnancy, to encourage ripening of the cervix and all that. But it's also, it's also taken for menstrual cramps and things like that. And it helps to regulate the endocrine system, healthy hormones. It helps to feed the glands, and it's good cell food, and it helps to regulate hormones. All right, so it So I had the tonifying and the strengthening of the uterus, and I had the regulating of the hormones through the evening primrose oil. And then I had the ginger. Again, ginger is one of those things that women can and do take to induce an abortion, or induce their period, induce bleeding, and also then induce birth. Although it's not as strong, so if it's a term baby, it's not going to be like super effective like other herbs in inducing labor, or helping to encourage labor. But it's more for when you're in the early stages and you're inducing your period or an abortion or things like that. But the ginger infusion, what it does is it opens up the energy pathways. All right, it helps that chi flow and that blood flow, that chi meaning the energy, through your body. And opening up those pathways is really essential to the relationship between your emotional, psychological, spiritual, and then to your physical being, your physical life. I sense now, after having worked with hundreds of women in these situations, and including myself, that the grounding and the unifying and the integrating of the psychological, emotional, and physical existence is so incredibly important. Now that I look back on my experience in retrospect, I see how all those herbs, combined with my knowledge and my intuition and my applied kinesiology and everything, all those together really served to help integrate the pregnancy. I really felt like it helped bring the baby sort of into her body so she could come into my body. It helped to tonify and strengthen and renew and refresh my body, to bring her further in to my body, to make it a better carrier and receptor of her growth and existence. So that's my profound experience. I feel like it was difficult for me at first to tell the story because there's just so much fear surrounding intuition, surrounding a woman's intuition and a woman's feeling about herself, especially if it goes against sort of a mainstream view or feeling on something. And certainly those herbs, the way I use them was quite unconventional and very much intuitive for my specific situation. And but I realized that all that sort of fear and confusion that I had that was sort of getting in the way of me integrating that experience into my life and realizing how incredibly powerful and knowledgeable I became through that experience. Yeah, it was blocking me from telling that story, and it certainly had to go through the process of processing that experience before I could tell it. And now that I have more of a grasp on the sort of situation and positioning of these babies in the womb, and a lot more hands-on experience, and then I sort of integrate that with my own experience and how I use those herbs, I am so much better set up to help women in these situations. So I really hope that this video could help many of you, could empower and inspire many of you to become more grounded in your journey, more trusting in your intuition, more integrated as a woman and a person, and give you courage and hope. So thanks so much for watching, and God bless.